the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
So I really am honored. Looking at the lineup of people that you had, I'm very honored to be included in that group of people.
Thank you. I forgot my coffee.
Oh, that's fine.
Please go ahead.
So thank you for having me. It's looking at the resumes and the backgrounds of some of the other people that spoke to you. I feel I'm just starting out, even though I'm like mid-career. But when you work full-time and you do school at the same time, it just happens that I feel like I'm starting out, but I'm really mid-career. So anyway, I know that you, I said a couple of things in the beginning when we were having a pre-dialogue of, thinking about, as you go through your program and your studies and things, think about what you're good at, think about what you're passionate about, and be honest with yourself what you're not. And if you can do that, you'll be successful. So, hi. One of the things that I also want to kind of touch on is where and how you get your information. As a scientist, we know the scientific principle, right? What's your question? Where do you get the answers? How do you base it? And how do you test it? We should also be doing that in our life, right? So with all the stuff going on in the world right now, and with social media and things like that, I just want to remind you to always continue to ask questions and find the facts, be honest with yourself, and do right by what your passions are. So I'm just going to start from that. So what I wanted to talk to you today about, I wanted to have a dialogue, and I want to continue the dialogue. So I only have 5 seconds. And I just gave this presentation to the Association, American Society of Quality or something like that, data management and IT in Long Island, the Association for Quality, Science Quality, I don't remember what it's called. So I gave this dialogue to acting professionals in data, IT and data management, cybersecurity and things like that. And it went really well because they're in the field. But and you guys are just starting out. So I'm very excited to have a dialogue with you guys from a very different perspective. So they're looking at their bottom line of how do they do their job, protect data integrity, and make money. You guys are like, how do I get my degree without falling apart and get started my life, right? But either way, we're all coming at this from the same perspective. We're trying to make a life, make a living, be happy with what we do, and do the best that we can, I hope. So I wanted to kind of talk to you about thinking always in systems. Not just, the systems that you work for or work with, but the systems that are connected. And that is sustainability, right? That's the connections of how things work together. And as scientists, we like to think like that, right? We like to say, ask the questions and think how they put together. I challenge you to think about it in other realms as well. And that's where sustainability and resiliency comes in. So I thought that I could at least spin this based on my background to say that I've communicated as a scientist, been a civil servant, I've communicated with the public with all different levels. My dissertation research was on public understandings of coastal hazard mitigation, both natural, engineered, and the inner relations between them. So I studied Union Beach, Lawrence Harbor on the Raritan Bay after Sandy, and from a professional standpoint, I was working on Sandy recovery and all environmental infrastructure for the state of New Jersey. And then I was studying on an academic side, what does the public understand of all this stuff that we're doing? And it was fascinating to me to realize that the public understands what needs to be done because they live there, they experience it, they have an awareness. The engineers and the scientists understand it, politicians understand it, but still we're not communicating, and it's over, 6 years now, and we're still recovering, and we will still recover because there's so many aspects. And so I want to touch a little bit on that for you to understand that from a political standpoint, from a policy standpoint, things have lots of layers. From a scientific standpoint, they have lots of layers, and there's connections between all of them. So going back to, was it John?
Yes.
You were talking about how to, merge two interests, your background, your interest, and put those things together. You can do that. And there'll be a slide or might help you guys to think about that. So, I started out my interest in environmental science and for my PhD in sustainability. And as I started studying in southern Louisiana after Katrina and the BP oil spill. I wanted to understand what is resiliency too. And they're like two sides of the same coin, right? Who can tell me what you think the difference between resiliency and sustainability is? Just throw it out, there's no... Can anybody give me a high? Show me that. Poke you? Go ahead.
I would think that sustainability is a little bit more, I guess, like future facing in terms of like what the effect is going to be on the future. And resiliency has to be what effect the present like has on the current system and sort of its like robustness.
Anybody else have an idea of what they think the difference between sustainability and resiliency are? When you think of resiliency, what do you think of? Anything, doesn't it?
I told you that just donuts is not enough to get them to talk. You have to give them something strong.
Do I need to break my other foot? So think about a resilient person. When you say, okay, she seems like a pretty resilient person. She just traveled 4 hours with a cast on her foot and looking pretty, stylish in the process. Right? Would you consider me a resilient person? Right. When you think about, so what are those qualities?
Strength.
Okay. What else?
Preparedness.
Able to bounce back.
And bounce forward. So I don't hop too much. I did have to hop onto the train and off the train. Okay, well, I'll continue this and then we'll get on to that. And I'm going to tell you what I think the difference is. So, but both of them are system sciences, right? Economics, macroeconomics, system science. And this is why I love biochemistry. You pull here, you get a ton of outputs over here. So one of the things that I want you to think about as we talk, but then also in everything that you do, is focus on the incomes or the inputs or what you're putting into a system, what all the outputs are, right? When you're engineering something, when you're thinking about a problem, think about what else is connected. And then, as for professional, engineers and things like that, also think about who are the users of your data, your products, your audience when you're giving presentations. I mean, how many of you have had to give a presentation and been like, don't think I can do this? Do you know why that is? Because you forget that you're an expert in what you're talking about. And if you're not an expert, you're not prepared for the presentation. So So when you get nervous, there's a reason why you're nervous. Because either you didn't get all the facts, what I was saying before, you don't understand what you're talking about, or you're intimidated by the audience because you think that they are going to ask you questions you can answer. No, nothing wrong with that. That's learning, right? And that's adapting. And that also goes into resiliency and sustainability. So there's just kind of my outline, but these are things I want you to kind of think about as we go on and talk about. So, resiliency. Buzz Hine is an ecologist that was like the first physical scientist to talk about resiliency, and he defined it as the ability to plan, adapt, and recover from a disturbance. He's an ecologist. He's talking about the physical, natural world, right? If you think about ecological systems, biological systems, they can move. One of the things that I focused on so much in my research was hard systems don't move, right? So an engineered wall doesn't move when the sea levels rise, when it's hit by, right? It doesn't move. It's resistant to change. Wetlands, dune systems, they move as the tide comes in, right? Anything. So he was looking at that. He was looking at natural systems saying they're resilient by nature, by design. They adjust to their conditions. We don't. When we engineer things to do a certain job, right? So one of the things that I pulled out when I've given talks about resiliency is functioning. What is it that you need to function? And in natural systems, coming from a biological background, it's the functioning is being able to evolve, right? In human systems, it's can I make money? Can I put food on my table? Can I get a job? Are we functioning? In social systems, it's can we all get along? Are we not going to kill each other? What is functioning? So you have to think about what is functioning when you're talking about resiliency for the most part. These are the main characteristics of resiliency. So diversity, do you have multiple options? So in terms of like transportation, one of the things I learned during Sandy recovery is we had everything go down. But we couldn't communicate. So we had IT systems go down. Well, diversity in IT systems are computers, 4G signals, 3G signals, landlines. What's missing in American culture? Smoke signals and talking to each other. So that's like diversity in like an IT system. Efficiency is how well you can get things done without wasting water, without wasting energy, without wasting money, all those things. That's efficiency. Redundancy is, do you have backup? Right? When the power goes out, when you decide that you want to leave your master's program and pursue a job in the fashion industry, do you have a backup? Do you have something else that you want to do? Adaptability, again, that's being able to adapt. So somebody had said that resilience is being strong, or I was adapting to my situation. I moved the first talk, which was supposed to be October 3rd, to today, because October 3rd I was in a lot of pain, wasn't in a walking boot, I was on crutches, not being able to get up here. So adapting to the situation. And recognizing that there's an interdependency, and that's what we're going to focus on, in all systems. Right? Can somebody give me an example of one interdependency in a system that you are studying or interested in? What do you think interdependency means?
Working together in a team.
Okay.
You need someone's approval to go ahead, or you need someone's help to do something that you don't know about.
So yeah, you're relying on other resources. You can't do it all by yourself. Dibs and I were talking about this before, and regarding my business right now, I'm just starting out. Can't hire anybody. I'm doing the accounting, I'm doing the bookkeeping, I'm doing the outreach, I'm doing the advertising, and I go too fast and I break my foot. So you've got to also have, there's a dependency on other people and resources. Liz and I were talking about this too. I mean, when I was in school at Ohio State, I had a $2 million NOAA grant for my research. I wouldn't have been able to get that today. No way. No way. And then we had to go to foundations to get money. And now, it's almost impossible to get money. So how do you expect to be able to do research with these very expensive equipment when you can't, get the money to do your research? So again, that's you're dependent on multiple things. But if you think about the other side of that, like my analogy regarding getting funding for your science or the things you want to study, then someone on the other side of the picture says, well, what do you do? And why don't we have answers to these questions? Well, we don't have answers to the questions because we weren't able to get the funding. So that interdependency, right? So you can't ask questions and get good results without having the resources to do that. But then, you have to always flip it around to the other side. Okay, so one of the reason I put this slide up here is just one example. One of the things I learned from my experience working for government and then my experience with my dissertation and being an academic was that there's a lot of people involved in decisions. So this is just one example for after Sandy recovery, how many people I had to deal with. People who are planning, the people at the local level who say, well, this is the way we want to do it. This is what our hazard mitigation plan says. This is what we should do, the big picture. And then you have the engineers that said, oh, no. We're going to do this, and this, and this, and this, and that's it. And then you have the scientists and the biologists and the EPA people going, oh, we got to do this, and we got to think about this, and then you have local governments, how much it's supposed to cost me. And in New Jersey, which is a very interesting case study on politics and decision making, let me tell you, the buck stops at the local level because we have local land use laws. So whatever the mayor and the town council says, that's what goes. It doesn't matter how much money is thrown at a problem. So you've got local government, and that's like county and municipal government. Then you've got state government and federal government who come up with the standards, who all of these people need to understand. So these guys have to communicate with these guys to write the standards. That's why when people ask me, the last presentation I gave on this topic, somebody said, why is it that it is going to take us until 2020 on the back bays of the coast of New Jersey to get some projects done? It's got to be studied. It's got to be funded. The study is funded. Public outreach. Then it's got to be appropriated from Congress. Then Congress has to say, okay, the states are going to get a certain amount of money. The federal government agencies are going to get money. And then it'll trickle down to the local level. And there's got to be a state match, and there's got to be a local match, and where are they going to get the money? That's why it takes 2020 for doing projects post-Sandy is early. That's early. That's the best case scenario of getting some of this infrastructure redone along the Barnegat. So I also want you to always think that there's always somebody else that either uses your science or needs to understand your science. And if you're not good at communicating it, find a person that is. That's that interdependency. Right? So this is I love pictures, and all of my advisors hated my pictures. My first poster at Ohio State had smiley faces on it, I swear. But people came over to the poster because it wasn't boring. So when I first started at NJIT, I wanted to study resilience. So I was thinking in systems, and we've all seen this Venn diagram where there's the social, the environmental, the economic. In here, and it's one of the things I said, this is economics, this is technical, this is science, this is human ingenuity, right here. This is what we were born into, being a part of this planet. This is what we created as human civilization. So, in each of these, there are shocks and stressors and things that throw things off. People don't get along and they're fighting in the streets. the, stock market goes, we can't get funding for research, that's a shock or a stressor. We have a natural disaster, now we've got to recover, and all of our fisheries have collapsed. All these things happen all at once, all the time. But as scientists and policymakers and decision makers, we're only focused on one part. But there's all connections, and all of these things are tied, right? So if you think about the example of Sandy, where our technical system went down, we had a natural disaster and a human disaster, and people couldn't get funding, they couldn't get water, their health was, people had flooded basements. That's normal. That's our new normal, right? It's been that way, but it's now getting more, evident. So at all of these places, there's considerations to what makes each of these subsystems and the whole system resilient. So you go back to the other slide of diversity, efficiency, redundancy, adaptability, cohesion for each of those subsystems. But then you also have to look at it from the big system. So my first proposal in JIT was to study what are the indicators for resilience for this socio-technical ecological system. That's like a lifetime of work. I was kind of told that, so I was, you're not studying this. But I started down in southern Louisiana after the BP oil spill and Katrina, because those were multiple shockers. This before Sandy, right? They had shocks to their fisheries, to their oil industry. They had huge problems with the engineering and the overflow of the canals and the flooding and the bathtub effects. They had huge issues with getting money there and logistics of getting people out, and people were dying, and stadiums were collapsing, and right down here. And their fisheries, everything was destroyed in the Gulf after the oil spill, right? So you have two huge disasters. And my question was, what makes them go back? And as I thought about it, I thought, well, how do they promote each of these in recovery? So there are two huge economic drivers are tourism, oil and gas / fisheries. So one of the things I learned when I was down there is when people aren't in fishing season, they're working on the oil rigs. So there's their offshore industry and their onshore industry, both devastated by Katrina and the oil spill. And the environment was devastated as well. So when my challenge to you as a scientist, as a human being, as soon-to-be professionals, always think about things like this. So when you're making a decision in any realm, in your professional realm, your academic realm, your personal realm, always think about what are the other incomes, inputs, outcomes, outputs, and what we call them in economics, the externalities, right? What are the extraneous things that could go wrong? Don't spend too much time on your mind flow, but it's always important to think about. This is how we prevent some of the problems that we're trying to fix of the past, right? So when I was reading your resume and thinking about some of the things I was passionate about, it was kind of cleaning up what we screwed up in the past. So how do we not do that and become more sustainable and resilient going forward? Think like this. I'll recommend Elinor Ostrom won she was the first female scientist to win a Nobel Prize in economics. She's since passed away, but she wrote a book called, I think it was her. No, there's one book that I found fascinating. It's called Thinking in Systems, and that was Donatella Meadows. But if you like economics, read anything from Elinor Ostrom. So she won the Nobel Prize for game theory, and talking about that in the capitalist and economic way. And game theory comes from, where's game theory come from? I'll give you a hint. Where does game theory come from?
Interdependency.
Huh?
Interdependency.
Originally. You can't. It's kind of on the slide.
Exactly.
It comes from how animals in the wild compete for resources. We're just a higher evolution of, right? So so she applied game theory and you know, I'm sure you guys have studied in sustainability, you know, management of the commons, common areas, and how do you resolve those kinds of things. So it's thinking like that. So I'm going to actually just leave it at this, and I want to talk. I want us to have, we can go back to any of those things. I can slow down a little bit because I talk very fast, and that's what I should be doing.